I'm so excited you're here. And I just wanted to share with you all, especially for those of you who maybe don't have as much history or context with Aldea. Um, so the the history of our church is one that's very rich and filled with so many people who've invested so much love, time, energy, passion into building what you're now sitting in. And I just want to honor Kevin and Sylvia for all that they've done, and not only all that they've put into this community and built and sacrificed and risked for, but also that they are still such a source of love and passion and encouragement for this community and for myself, for me and Olivia. Growing up in the types of environments that I grew up in, I never could have ever imagined and pictured the type of love and support that I've received from the Skinners, who really built this church that you're sitting in right now. It's a very rare and beautiful thing, and I don't know what this experience would be like without the level of encouragement that you have given to us. And so I just want to share that so you understand a little bit more about the context of this conversation. I think it's a conversation that, I don't know how many churches right now are having this type of conversation. So I'm really excited to hear more about your journey, the journey of Aldea through your eyes. And thank you for sharing your story.
Yeah, and I just want to say thank you so much to you, Jake. And I'm going to try really hard. I brought some tissues up here in case I do get verklempt. But I feel so honored to be able to sit here next to Jake, and we are just over the moon happy that they have taken Aldea on and are just going to lead it in so many new and exciting ways. We can't wait to see all of the new things, all of the changes, all of the beauty that Aldea will continue to evolve into. And when Jake asked me to do this, one thing that struck me right off the bat was the way he even named the series. Isn't asking people to tell their stories. He's asking us to own our stories. And there is a big difference between that, because you can tell your story all day long, but to really be able to own it and to see how it's shaped your life and how it will continue to shape your life in the future is just a really cool thing. And I have to tell you, I did meet with my therapist this week, and that was one of the things, oh my gosh, I have a lot of my story to own here. So I really like that concept of owning.
It's a challenge, and that's part of why I named it that way, is because we're all in the process of learning how to own different pieces of where we come from and learning how to integrate. That's a big part of it, is integrating. Seeing these pieces of our stories not as, I don't know where that belongs, I don't know how to fit that in, but seeing maybe even in the mystery of it, I can still bring it into the fold, and have compassion for ourselves. So in that, what are the parts of your story when you look back that might be more difficult to own as you're bringing it in?
Yeah, so I have a little bit of a longer story than you do, just because I've been here a little bit longer. I'm not talking about all day on this planet, as you can tell. And many of you have heard a lot of my story, but I just want to highlight a few things for me. When I think of what's difficult to own, I think about a lot of the choices I've made, the things I've done, the things I haven't done, that were just based in fear. Like, I grew up with very much a fear-filled story. And I think Jake has some pictures of me. This one, I think I was a relatively happy child. The pictures I see of myself as a very young child, I was happy. I'm sitting here, you can't really see her, but I'm sitting on the lap of my father's mother, my grandmother, for whom I am named. Her name was also Sylvia. And I look at this and I'm like, I think I was kind of a stinker. And I see what I love about this picture is just a little bit of rebellion. And I think that that served me well. It helped me to be resilient throughout my life. So this is me as a stinker. But I do so like this picture. This is my family that I grew up in. My parents, Myrna and Bill. Myrna Bell. My mom hated her name, Myrna Bell. And my brother, Phil. And we actually moved to Arizona when I was about 4 years old. We did move around quite a bit. but I did start in Arizona at 4 until I was 8. That picture on the bottom, of course, almost all family pictures were taken before you go to church. So we're heading out the door to church, and my brother's got his big old Bible there, and I've got my dress and knee socks on. And so my family, by most appearances, looked to be like a pretty normal family. Dad was an engineer, and my mom was a stay-at-home mom. I went to Christian schools, and we lived in a suburban home. So it looked on the outside like I had a normal family, but this is my family. This is me at about, I think I might be 9 or 10 years old here. And the reason I chose this picture and what I like and don't like about this picture is by the time I'm this age, I'm well aware that what my family shows up to Sunday services looking like is not what my family is like at home. My parents had a very chaotic marriage, and there was just, I was thinking the other day about how many, I don't know many, but a few times I can remember driving to church and my brother and father were fighting, and my brother would wait till the car was stopped and open the door and get out and take off, and then we'd, go try to find him. I remember one time we couldn't find him, and I was terrified. Again, the fear that we wouldn't find him. But I see the sadness in my eyes here. I see that it's there, and it's already starting. And I really, because everything was based on fear, when I was little, like 4.5 years old, I went and saw one of those flannel board stories that was all about, it was all about Jesus dying on the cross for me, and I needed to become a Christian. I needed to say the prayer. And so at 4.5 years old, like I don't know how a 4.5-year-old child understands that or decides to do that, but I knew one thing. I didn't want to go to hell, right? So, because I'm pretty sure they had some scary pictures of what hell would be like. So I decided pretty young that I was just going to be the best Christian that I could be. My family went to a very fundamentalist church with a lot of rules, certainly no dancing, and I just made that decision, and I knew very young that I would go into ministry. I really felt called, and I've struggled with that at this point in my life. Like, was it a calling or was it just trying to be good? I don't know. I feel like it's been a good part of my life, but it definitely, all the decisions were based on fear. So the next picture we have is my family, my young family. This is Mother's Day, I believe, 1991. And I look at myself there, and I see a family getting ready to repeat everything, that we both brought to our family. We both grew up in Christian homes. I don't think Kevin ever remembers a time of not being in church, and probably heard the same flannel board story, and also was scared of going to hell. So. And but we had a little softer version. I am that lovely little outfit that I believe I made myself is a jumpsuit. So I'm wearing pants to church, but Kevin is wearing a shirt and tie, and you're going to say something about it.
Well, I was going to say, every time I see this picture, I just think Kevin looks like a 2023 hipster. Like, that look has come all the way back around. It's back in. So
I know my son has that mustache. Ooh, I don't like it. Yeah, but there we are, getting ready to kind of repeat what we knew to raise our family to be good little evangelicals. But at this point, our faith had already evolved a little bit, and there was a little shift here. So I'm thankful that there were some more shifts to come. Oh, okay. He's going to show you a picture, a fairly recent picture, although the little guy is going to turn 4 this week. But this is my beautiful family now. And
it's interesting, you talk about being so ready and in position to repeat the cycle. And I think for so many of us, whether or not we have chosen this for ourselves or felt this, we felt that we needed to do this But the word for a lot of us is cycle breaker, breaking the cycles. For a lot of us, we have family history, things that go so deep, and expectations that were placed on you. And then you get to you and finding out who you are and who you want to be in the world. And it doesn't always fit with generations and generations of expectations and assumptions. And so what do you need to do? Well, you need to break the cycle. You need to say, I'm going to choose something different for myself. But it's not easy. It's such a difficult process, especially when so much of your life and your safety is invested and has been chosen for you to be in the cycle, right? So I just want to commend you and commend all of you for all the ways in which we choose to say, I'm going to choose to own my story for what it is, and I'm not going to let someone else tell me what my story is. But it's a difficult thing. It requires some shifts, some leaps of faith. And so what were those shifts? What were those leaps for you?
Well, I think there were many incremental shifts, but I tried to come up with a few that really stood out to me. And the first one happened about the same time that picture was taken, maybe a little earlier, because when we had our first child, I remember holding my baby and just feeling such an overwhelming sense of love. And like, I'm looking at this child and thinking, how could this baby ever do anything that would make me love him less? And I just loved him more and more every single day, and he was just perfect. Well, until he became a teenager. No, just kidding. And then I had another one and another one, and these children were just filled me with so much love, and it contradicted everything I had grown to believe I'd grown up with about a father in heaven who was punitive, who I could anger, if I broke one of the rules, could even possibly turn his back on me. And the irony of this is I was raised with this doctrinal belief of a faith that a grace that had no works. Like, I couldn't earn it. It was totally, God was going to give it to me because he's God and I'm not, and all I had to do was accept it. But the message that I continually got was, but don't screw up. Follow the rules. Don't wear pants. Don't dance. Don't have sex before you're married. That's a biggie. So,
For a lot of us, we were given some version of that and some idea about God and maybe even the limits of the love of God. And often we were given maybe contradicting understandings that God's love is limitless, and yet you're coming up against these limits. And so what I find interesting, in this series we've talked about how great grief can break those ideas open and challenge you to look at God a new way, and in this case, great love. That you were experiencing a mother's love, which is such a deep and vast love that can't really be described until you're in it. Why am I sitting here trying to describe it? And yet it's almost like you're wondering, well, how can I be more loving than this idea of God? Maybe I need to then challenge the idea of God.
Yeah, and I even came to the conclusion that it was blasphemous for me to continue to believe that I could love my children more than God could love me. And about this time, Kevin picked up this book and started reading a book. And when you're really entrenched in that world, you don't read anything outside of what's allowed. But he picked up a book by a guy named Chuck Swindoll, and he was okay because he led one of the early mega churches in the evangelical community. And he's actually, I looked him up while I was telling Jake about this because he didn't know who Chuck Swindoll was. How many people do know who he is? Anybody? A few. And he wrote a book called Grace Awakening. He's still actually preaching in his 80s, I believe. And this book was very impactful because he talked about a true grace, like the kind of grace that it didn't matter what I did, God would still love me. I still had to be an evangelical, and I still had to follow the rules of being an evangelical. I had to believe the right things. But it opened up this whole new world for me of what it really meant to be loved by a gracious God. And that was so powerful, I think, for both of us at that time in our lives. And it was about that time that we packed up our bags, and Kevin took his first church as a senior pastor in Aurora, Minnesota. And of course, this was God's will for our lives because it was all laid out for us and the circumstances that surrounded it. We did have to choose between a church in Northern California and this church in Minnesota, but we decided to go to Minnesota. And Minnesota was nothing short of a living hell. And I've shared that with you. You guys have heard the story of Minnesota. And so we were there for 2 years, and then we moved back to...
Is that when hell freezes over?
That is where... Oh, it's cold in hell, Jake. It's not hot. It's definitely cold in hell. So we moved to Phoenix, and to the other extreme. And, after we were literally thrown out of Minnesota. And we found ourselves just, like... devastated and really questioning a lot about our faith because we felt like we were doing what we were supposed to do. And I can remember Kevin even saying, expressing kind of a crisis of faith. Well, where did I miss it? Where did I get off the right path? Because that's what we were taught. There was one person to marry. There was one job to take. There was one thing to do with your life. And so there we were, and just kind of a broken, devastated family. And shortly after that, we came to Tucson, and Kevin, in some of his messages, my pastor started talking about, well, what if it's really more like a playground? So God, has this big backyard that he invites us into, and there's a fence around it. Don't get me wrong, there's a fence around it. You got to stay in the fence. But in the playground, there's a jungle gym and a slide and a little play pool and a swing set. And so it doesn't matter which one of those you choose. And if you choose to go on the swing set, but I decide to go down the slide, it's okay because we're in the backyard. We're all in there together. And it's okay to wander over to the fence, and you might look through one of those little holes in the fence and see what's out there, but don't get too close and don't stay over there too long. You can go to the gate as long as you're there to open the gate for someone to invite them into the backyard. Yeah, no leaving. No asking why there's a fence, no asking why there's a gate. But this actually did, for me, open up so much freedom to be more, of who more of my authentic self. So that worked for a while, and the church in Tucson grew. We built the big building on Ina Road and started putting out the dog and pony show. That's a whole other story. And that started to get really hard because all the people that were in the playground, in the fence, they all kind of started fighting over who's going to be on the swing set and who should be on the slide. And they're just, it just kind of got ugly. And so then there was another shift.
Well, I think that metaphor of the backyard is so fascinating because for all of us, whether or not you grew up in a church like she's describing, it's the same type of environment that I grew up in, so I relate to that. But whether or not that's what you grew up in, we all were handed some idea of a backyard and a fence and things that you could think about or could talk about, books that you could read or you shouldn't read, and there was always a perimeter that you need to be mindful of. And again, these shifts, they just break our idea of that perimeter. They make us question, well, why was I actually given this? Why am I operating within this? And so, again, it takes courage because outside of the fence, as far as we know, it's danger, it's mysterious.
It's the slippery slope.
But we are about expanding and having an expansive, inclusive, ever-evolving, loving worldview, and that involves, at times, taking a step outside of the fence, but that is very risky. What are for you, what were, at that moment, I imagine that there was a feeling of risk, a feeling of sacrifice to take those steps. What was that like?
Yeah, so the risk really did start when we started to open the gate and tiptoe outside of that gate. And like I said, on the other side of the gate is the slippery slope. And that's where the books are that you're not supposed to read. So on a particular staycation at Westward Look, and we're sitting there by the pool, kind of enjoying some time away, like a couple miles away. Well, we're literally right across the street from the church, but a few miles from our home. And I look over, and there's this book that my husband is reading, and I kind of look at the title, and I do not remember the title of the book, but the gist of it was, There Might Not Be a Hell. And I'm like, what the hell? Because this is a risk I'm not quite sure I'm ready to take. He was all for it, but I really struggled with this. Because, I mean, hell, that's kind of what keeps us all in the fence, right? And it sort of started to feel like, oh, we should not have gone outside of that gate. And why are you reading these books? But, I think the more he read and he would pass on to me, one of the things I love about reading a book after him is he will underline certain sections. And it gives, sometimes it feels almost a little too personal, but it kind of gives me a window into what he's thinking. And he was definitely underlining that there might not be a hell stuff. But out of that, the whole experience was just, a whole new way of doing church. And that was the biggest shift of all, is when CCF birthed Aldea. And, there's this funny thing that happens when you tell people that the fence is gone, when you start tearing down the fence. Yeah, they all get out, and they don't come back. They go looking for other playgrounds because, people really, really want and need that fence. I think I don't know if it's easier just for people to be told how to think and what to do. It's much easier.
Well, and whether or not you grew up with these really challenging ideas, theological ideas such as hell, we all can understand the shift between a fear-based view of reality and a love-based view of reality. And in a way, when you're describing that shift and when Aldea is born, I think you're really describing the birthing of a community based on love. Rather than fear. Often, so many of these larger communities that I've been a part of, and I can understand, whether it's up front or it's kind of hidden underneath, there is this underlying sense of fear, and that's how you keep the thing moving. That's how you keep things in line. But we as this community have such a beautiful commitment to being a place of love and inclusion, and so it required that movement. And it's such a long, beautiful, rich journey of growing and in a lot of ways taking your time too. Not really just being with whatever stage you were at. You can look back at it now, and so often we look back at our story, we kind of have a better way of framing it. But I would now say, where do you find yourself now after having gone through all those shifts, all those sacrifices, people leaving, people being hurtful, fear to love, but again, it takes so long for us to internalize so many of these ideas. So where do you find yourself with spirituality through all those shifts?
Well, to be honest, I find myself where we started this whole talk, the game. Remember, the game was all about one-syllable words, and my faith before was full of multi-syllable words that most people didn't even understand, big doctrinal words. And but now my faith is more about those one-syllable words like faith and hope and love. And so just the simplicity of I love Aldea's one thing that, like, the one thing that we hoped people would believe in was love. Love, period. Like a literal period after that. That's it. That's all we need. And we can learn and grow from each other's beliefs or no belief at all. You can come here and have no belief at all, but maybe you just want to be in community. Maybe you just want to share your life with other people, and that's okay. And so it's easier in some ways to be in the backyard where you get the rules handed to you and you know exactly what you're supposed to do. You can just kind of coast. you can coast till you can't. I mean, I think everybody either just makes peace with coasting, or they reach a point where like, oh, this doesn't resonate with who I am. And when you start to see all of those things that, because I can't remember which author it is. It might be Rob Bell, that talks about Christianity really kind of being like, calls it brickianity. Is that, I don't know if that's Rob Bell. It is. Kevin's saying it's Rob Bell. And basically, like if you pull one brick out, the whole thing kind of crumbles. So it's like all built on all these different things, but like that one brick isn't right, but you can't touch it. You can't pull it out. You can't question it, because everything will fall apart. You will be at the bottom of the slippery slope. And so, yeah, for me, it's really about the simplicity of love, period.
And I think that really is the root and the heart of so many of the religions that we now have seen over time have become quite complicated, have become brickianity, but at the end of the day, there's just a deep simplicity. There's no bricks that you can pull away from love, and love crumbles, right? Peace, joy. What are those things for you, where you think, well, when I look back and I've now come to really define my life around some guiding principles, what are those one-syllable words for you where you think, man, joy?
Trust.
Oh, I love that. Trust.
Honesty.
That's 3, but...
Oh, go smack him. Truth. Hope. I love that. Oh, light. Those are awesome. Yeah. For me, having the honor, the ability, the privilege of being part of this community, even after the time of leading it has passed. I told you I might cry.
Yeah, that's why you have the... Yeah.
It truly is a place that means so much to me. And Jake asked me to think about why that is. And I think it's because why Aldea is so important to me is because Aldea was there for me. When you lead a community, you're not just leading it for leading it, you're part of it too. And so that spiritual journey that we walked through, and that many of you walked through with us, and the journey that you accompanied us on, that's why it's so important to me. It's community. That really sums it up. And one of the most beautiful things that we have done at Aldea for years is the lighting of the candles. And one thing that I always loved about that, I usually sit right about there, and I often would linger before coming up because I love to watch your faces and the way you stood here in line and you greeted each other and you lit those candles. It demonstrated that one word that has been so important for me, and that's love. So I just want to say thank you to you for including me and welcoming me here. And we just want to conclude with a little bit of candle lighting. I want to give you that opportunity to light a candle. And everybody has something in their story that is difficult to own. I mean, we all have something in our spiritual story, in our life story. And what I would invite you to do this morning when you come to light a candle is to light a candle for that thing. Maybe it's more than one thing, but if you can try to think of just one thing that you'd like to focus on, come and light a candle and honor that part of your story. And maybe this week start to think of some ways you can own that part of your story and allow it to help you become the most authentic version of yourself. I just want to thank you so much for being here this morning, and we'll end with the candle lighting.